3 Oscars, 12 nominations, the most dangerous smile in American cinema. For 4 decades, Jack Nicholson owned every room he walked into. Then, after 2010, he simply vanished. No farewell film, no retirement speech, no explanation. For 15 years, the man who played the Joker, Jack Torrance, and Randall McMurphy has been locked behind the gates of a house on Mulholland Drive. Then, in February 2025, he appeared one last time, and what people saw told them more than any interview ever could. To understand why Jack Nicholson disappeared, you have to understand what shaped him, and the first thing was a lie so deep it took nearly 4 decades to uncover. He was born on April 22, 1937, in New York City, but his family was from Neptune, New Jersey. His teenage mother, June Nicholson, traveled to New York to give birth quietly, away from small-town gossip. She was unmarried. The father was already married to someone else. A scandal like that could have destroyed a family, so June's mother, Ethel May, stepped in and registered herself as his mother. June was reclassified as his older sister. The boy grew up, believing his grandmother was his mother, and his mother was his sister. In 1954, Ethel May filed a birth certificate that reinforced the fiction. The household was modest and fractured. The man Jack believed was his father was actually his grandfather. Ethel May cut hair. Neither had been raised by their own biological parents. The whole family was built on displacement and silence, and Jack absorbed that atmosphere before he was old enough to understand it. He would not learn the truth until 1974, when he was already 37 and famous. A researcher from Time magazine called him and told him that the woman he thought was his mother was actually his grandmother, and the woman he thought was his sister was his real mother. By the time Jack found out, both women were dead. June died of cancer in 1963. Ethel May died in 1970. The people who could have explained the lie were gone before it was ever exposed. Nicholson handled it with unsettling calm. He said it was dramatic but not traumatizing, because he was already psychologically formed. But the marks were there. He never married. He had children with different women, but kept his romantic life deliberately chaotic. The boy raised inside a secret grew into a man who kept the world at a comfortable distance, and that distance would eventually swallow him whole. Jack Nicholson spent the better part of a decade failing in Hollywood before anyone noticed him. His first job was running errands at the cartoon studio, where the creators of Tom and Jerry worked. He carried mail, fetched coffee, and watched entertainment from the outside. When offered a real animator position, he turned it down because it meant a pay cut. The cartoon division shut down, and Nicholson drifted toward acting. He trained at the Players Ring Theater under Jeff Corey, a former actor blacklisted during the McCarthy era, who reinvented himself as a teacher. Corey taught that great acting was not about performing emotion, but about absorbing life deeply enough that the emotion became real. By the mid-1960s, Nicholson had appeared in roughly 15 films with almost no name recognition. He started writing screenplays out of necessity because nobody offered him leading roles. The part that made him famous, George Hansen in Easy Rider, only came because another actor dropped out after a violent argument with director Dennis Hopper. Easy Rider became a cultural earthquake in 1969, and Nicholson rode the blast wave. His first Oscar nomination followed. Then came a run with almost no parallel in American film: 5 Easy Pieces in 1970, Chinatown in 1974, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 1975, which won him his first Oscar and swept all 5 major Academy Awards, The Shining in 1980, Terms of Endearment in 1983, winning his second Oscar, Batman in 1989, where he negotiated a profit-sharing deal, reportedly earning between $60 and $90 million. A Few Good Men in 1992, As Good as It Gets in 1997, winning his third. By the turn of the millennium, Jack Nicholson was not just a movie star. He was a monument, and then, quietly, the monument began to retreat. The typical coverage of Nicholson's disappearance focuses almost entirely on his health, but there is another thread explaining more about why he withdrew. His romantic life was epic in scale and brutal in its patterns. He was involved with Angelica Huston for 17 years, one of the most storied relationships in Hollywood history. He ended it cruelly. Over dinner, he told her another woman was going to have his baby. Huston, who had struggled with her own fertility, told him there was only room for one woman in the picture. One conversation ended 17 years. The other woman, Rebecca Broussard, gave him 2 children, Lorraine in 1990 and Ray in 1992, but that relationship also eventually unraveled. Nicholson dated Laura Flynn Boyle in the early 2000s, and when that ended, he was in his late 60s and tired. In a rare 2013 Vanity Fair interview, he said something that landed hard. He was no longer driven to be out there anymore. The only films he cared about were ones dealing with real emotion, and he admitted he no longer had the energy to both work and fool around, and during his last few movies, he hardly left the hotel at night. For a man whose off-screen life had been as legendary as his on-screen work, that sentence was a window into a fundamental shift. The engine that powered his public life had slowed down. Once that engine stopped, there was no reason to keep performing. His final film, How Do You Know, was released in December 2010. It lost roughly $70 million, and Jack Nicholson, without ever saying so publicly, never made another movie again. Rumors started almost immediately. In 2013, Radar Online reported he stepped away because of memory loss, claiming he could no longer remember lines. People close to him pushed back. A source told Maria Shriver he was not dealing with dementia and was still reading scripts, but the years kept passing, and no project ever materialized. In 2017, he was briefly attached to an American remake of Tony Erdmann. For a moment, it looked like a genuine comeback. Then he dropped out, and the production collapsed. Director James L. Brooks later said Nicholson was still reading scripts all the time, a haunting detail suggesting the door was never closed in his mind. It just never opened in practice. Reports from 2021 and 2022 described Nicholson spending nearly all his time inside his Mulholland Drive compound. Sources described a man who rarely left the property, physically stable, but whose world had contracted dramatically. His children, particularly Lorraine and Ray, became his primary caretakers. Ray Nicholson, who has built his own acting career and appeared in Smile 2 in 2024, has spoken about his father with love. He told Deadline they were very different people, born decades apart, and the things affecting one did not necessarily affect the other. But he added that he ate dinner with his father every night growing up, and that studying his father was how he learned to be a human being. In May 2025, a source gave the New York Post the most honest assessment anyone close to Nicholson has ever offered. The source said, Nicholson did not like to be seen much in public anymore. He had been spotted at a hotel, and was a little wobbly. Part of his appeal had been his extravagant character and lifestyle, and all of it catches up with you eventually. Then the source added a line that explains the disappearance better than any medical diagnosis ever could. Jack and his inner circle preferred that people remember him as he was. That is not the statement of a man in crisis. That is the statement of a man making a choice. Jack Nicholson is not hiding because he is broken. He is choosing to let the version of himself that the world fell in love with be the version that endures. The monster from The Shining, the Joker from Batman, the rebel from Cuckoo's Nest, those are the faces he wants people to carry, not an 88-year-old man with a cane. But even a man committed to disappearing could not resist one final curtain call. On February 16, 2025, NBC aired the SNL 50th anniversary special. The audience at Studio 8H was packed with the biggest names in entertainment. From his seat in the crowd, wearing a dark jacket, tinted glasses, and a Yankees beret, 87-year-old Jack Nicholson leaned forward and spoke 5 words. Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Sandler. The room erupted. Sandler, his co-star from Anger Management, shouted back, telling the audience to give it up for Jack, that Jack had made it out tonight, and that he loved him. For Nicholson, who had not been seen publicly since a Lakers game in May 2023, the appearance was a shock. His daughter Lorraine sat beside him. Photographers captured him the next day, leaving the Carlisle Hotel, walking with a cane. He was 87, and the gap between the man in the beret and the man who terrorized Shelley Duvall through the Overlook Hotel was 45 years wide. Here is what mattered about that moment. Nicholson had never hosted Saturday Night Live. He appeared at the 40th anniversary in 2015, and later regretted never hosting. So when he showed up for the 50th, seated in the crowd rather than on stage, it carried weight beyond celebrity. This was a man acknowledging the end of something, not with a speech, with 5 words and applause from a room full of people who understood what they were witnessing. It was not a comeback. It was a goodbye disguised as a cameo. 8 months later, the world dealt him another blow. On October 11, 2025, Diane Keaton died at 79 from pneumonia. Keaton had been one of Nicholson's closest friends and creative partners for decades. They starred together in Something's Gotta Give in 2003, and their connection went far deeper than one film. She was part of the small circle who still had access to the man behind the gates. Those close to Nicholson were deeply concerned about how the loss would affect him. For a man already living a contracted life, losing one of the few remaining connections to the world he once dominated was profound. But months before Keaton's death, Danny DeVito, Nicholson's friend of more than 50 years, gave the most reassuring update in a long time. DeVito told people he had just seen Jack around his birthday, and he was great. DeVito said there had been no need for an icebreaker from the very beginning. They simply recognized each other. That friendship, stretching back to the early 1970s, may be one of the few threads still connecting Nicholson to the outside world. DeVito checks in. The children are present. The house on Mulholland Drive still stands. The industry has moved on without him. Even so, moments of the old Jack surface. In January 2025, when devastating wildfires swept through Pacific Palisades, Nicholson reportedly offered his Mulholland Drive home to Angelica Houston, the same woman whose heart he broke decades earlier. She had lost her own home. The gesture was quiet, private, never made public by either, but it revealed the man behind the gates was still paying attention, still connected to those who mattered, still capable of generosity from inside his isolation. There is no single answer to why Jack Nicholson vanished. The truth is, a combination of things arriving at the same time, and reinforcing each other until Withdrawal became its own gravity. His body slowed down, the energy powering the wildest life in Hollywood diminished, and he said so himself in 2013. His appetite for work changed. He still read scripts, but nothing moved him enough to endure the cost of making a film. The industry changed around him, becoming a world of franchises and digital effects with little use for the raw, dangerous presence he built his legend on. The relationships that kept him tethered to public life ended one by one until only family and old friends remained. But the deepest explanation may be the one his inner circle gave. They preferred that people remember him as he was. That is profound self-awareness from a man whose career was built on presence. He understood that the image matters. He chose to protect it by stepping away before the world could watch it fade. Jack Nicholson did not lose Hollywood. He let it go. He left on his own terms, without announcement, without ceremony, without giving the public a final bow. He simply stopped and let the silence speak. The man who gave us the axe through the door, the sunglasses at courtside, the grin that could terrify or seduce, decided the greatest final act was no act at all, just a closed gate on a hill above Los Angeles, and a legacy needing nothing added. As of 2026, that gate remains closed, and the legend remains untouched.